I was once again the last one left in the office. The computers were off, the corridors were empty, but beyond the silence and glass windows, neon New York beat with trembling yellow light. I fled into the night as if I were fleeing from myself, from work, from thoughts, from emptiness. The night bus was waiting like the only witness to my escape. When I stepped inside, there wasn't a single soul. Only one man behind the wheel, tall, with dark hair falling like fog onto a strong neck. His eyes lit up in the mirror when he noticed me. "Rachel," he said, as though he had already been waiting. I shivered. How could the driver know my name? Maybe I imagined it. His voice was low, calm, almost dangerous. I only nodded, sat down closer to the door, yet some static tension lay between us, something you could feel on your skin. Every breath radiated more than ordinary silence. The bus started moving, the rails of the streets reflecting in the mirrors like frames of film. Marcus, if that was his name, I saw it on the tablet, kept glancing sideways at me. His gaze was heavier than words. And every movement of his fingers on the wheel made me almost smile against my will. I hated this moment, this awareness that it could be dangerous to feel this way. "Stay until the very end," he said, as if making a promise. I felt my pulse in my throat. His voice became a bridge between reality and dream. And in the moment when the city was slowly swallowed by fog, his silhouette seemed closer than should ever be allowed between a driver and an ordinary passenger. My lips betrayed me with the warmth of anticipation. The bus swayed through the empty streets, and I felt every jolt as if it were a pulse inside me. Marcus stayed silent, but his silence was not indifferent, it was filled, heavy, like the night fog outside the windows. I stared into the darkness, yet every glimmer of light slid across my reflection, painting a stranger on the glass, a woman tired, but hungry for something she had long been missing. Suddenly the bus braked, and losing my balance, I grabbed the handrail. His fingers were already there. Warm, strong, they touched mine, and a spark shot through us, impossible to hide beneath any excuse. He didn't move his hand away, and I couldn't pull mine back either. Marcus finally spoke, "Going far?" His voice was quiet, but in it I heard a challenge. "To the last stop," I answered, though I wasn't even sure what I wanted more, to ride on or to stay right here, in this suspended moment. His smile appeared in the mirror, unclear, but enough to make my heart race. The air between us grew thicker, as if the bus itself knew that its movement was only a pretext. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, but I felt his gaze so sharply, as if he touched me not with his eyes but with his hand. And in that moment it seemed the night itself stopped, waiting for our first step across the line of what was allowed. The glow of streetlights smeared across the glass, as if the night itself had decided to become a conspirator in our game. I felt the bus slowly drive onto the bridge, and fog began wrapping us in a white veil. It seemed we no longer belonged to the city, only to this moving box where two remained, him and me. Marcus looked at me through the mirror, but this time he didn't look away. I felt my breath falter, and without realizing it, I rose from my seat to move closer. My heart beat so loudly I was afraid he could hear it. I touched the cold metal of the handrail, and with a light motion of his fingers he signaled me to stop. Marcus stood up from the driver's seat, leaving the wheel on autopilot. His figure filled the space between us, and the night's silence suddenly became almost unbearable. We ended up face to face, so close I could smell his skin, warm and slightly bitter, like unsweetened coffee. He leaned down so low my breath brushed his cheek. The moment stretched like a burning wire, we both waited to see who would dare first. His hand slid along the seat, pressing down beside my thigh, and my body answered with a shiver. I felt that just a little more and my lips would find his on their own, but he stopped at the very edge of it. "Not yet," he whispered, and his words were a painfully sweet challenge. The fog outside erased the city, leaving only us, suspended between reality and desire. The bus rocked above the river as if it, too, hesitated whether to go any further. Fog swallowed the bridge, made it spectral, and inside there was only our breathing and pulses beating in a single rhythm. Marcus stood so close there was nowhere left for me to retreat. His shoulders eclipsed the light, and I felt the warmth of his body surround me. He was silent, but in his gaze there was more than in 1,000 words. I lifted my eyes and met his as if falling into a depth. My fingers reached out to his chest on their own, brushing the fabric of his shirt. Then he closed the step that still separated us and caught my hand, not harshly, but with a strength I could feel. His fingers traced along my palm, as though asking permission, and I could not hold back a soft sigh. That was enough for the boundary to vanish. His lips touched mine, at first gently, like a test, like a promise. But then the kiss grew hungrier, the kind of hunger we had both long refused to admit. I felt my body press against him, his hand bracing against the seat behind me, trapping me in a cage I had no wish to escape. The kiss lasted long, heavy, as if we were trying to find everything lost within it. When he finally drew back for a breath, my lips burned and my heart pounded so wildly I could hardly stand. "You know this is dangerous?" Marcus whispered, his breath mingling with mine. I smiled, though my chest ached with desire. "That's exactly why," I answered, and our lips found each other again while the bridge disappeared into the fog. His hands grew bolder as our kisses deepened, shedding caution. The metal body of the bus hummed with a low resonance, but for me there was only the heat of his palms sliding over my shoulders and lower, tracing lines that set my body aflame. I felt my fingers clutching at his shirt, gripping the fabric as if I wanted to tear it away, to feel even more closeness. Marcus leaned down, his lips trailing to my ear, his breath scorching my skin. "Tell me if I should stop," he whispered, but I only pressed myself harder against him, answering with my body instead of words. The bus lurched, and we both lost our balance, falling together onto the seat, laughing softly and breathlessly. His laugh quickly melted into another kiss, hot and consuming. My skirt rode up as his hand found its way to my thigh, careful, yet assured. Every nerve in me woke under his touch, my head turning empty with nothing left but desire. His fingers slid higher, and I caught his hand only to steady myself, to be certain of us in this reckless moment. I looked into his eyes, dark as the night above the city, and saw there not only hunger but a kind of protection I had been missing. So I let go. His touch grew deliberate, and my body answered with a moan that fused with the sound of the engine. I grasped his neck, drawing him deeper into me, and the world around us disappeared completely. There were only the two of us, strangers who had met in the night fog and lost control. The bus rumbled dully across the bridge, but now it was only a distant sound, dissolving into the rhythm of our breathing. His lips moved along my neck, leaving marks that made my body tremble. I felt his hands sliding confidently down my back, pausing at curves, gripping me as if he feared letting go even for a moment. My skin burned, each touch igniting fire. I reached for the buttons of his shirt in the darkness, fumbling them open, and felt the warmth of his chest beneath my palms. His body was solid, built to hold me, to cover me. We were no longer hiding or seeking excuses, the night was ours, and the bridge wrapped in fog stood as our silent witness. He lifted me onto his lap, and I straddled him, our lips colliding in a kiss so dizzying it stole the ground from under me. Marcus slid the seat back to make space, his hands slipping under my blouse, touching bare skin. I gasped at the wave of pleasure rippling through me. His fingers traced every inch, while my hands wandered his back, clutching to anchor myself in this reality. The bus swayed again, and I felt him press me harder against him, leaving no space between us. Our movements grew quicker, more desperate, as if we both knew this night could vanish as suddenly as it began. When he whispered my name, low and hoarse, I knew we had crossed a line from which there was no return. His hands no longer hesitated, they moved with certainty, greedily, as though he wanted to memorize every curve of my body. I felt my blouse slip off my shoulder, and the cool air brushed my skin, making me shiver, yet his lips quickly covered the spot, leaving a hot trail. My breath broke, and I clutched his shoulders, afraid of falling, though in his arms I felt the safest I ever had. He lifted me, carrying me toward the back seat, and together we tumbled into the shadows where the trembling streetlights could barely reach. The fog outside cloaked us from the world. His body pressed me into the soft upholstery, and I felt our movements sink into one rhythm, as if we had known each other forever. Our kisses broke only to return again, hotter, more desperate. I pulled him closer with both hands, surrendering to the growing fire until it threatened to consume me. When his hand slid lower, I arched up to meet him, giving myself without doubt. Every nerve in me sang at the forbidden sweetness of this collision. Marcus leaned his forehead to mine and whispered, "You are the madness of this night." His words pierced deeper than any touch. I answered with a kiss, and this time we did not stop. Our movements grew wilder, wave after wave crashing through me, stealing the last remnants of control. I felt only heat, trembling, and our shared breath as the world outside disappeared into nothingness. The world outside the windows dissolved completely into fog, and it seemed that only this bus, our bodies, and the rhythm we set for each other still existed. His movements grew stronger, deeper, and each thrust sent tremors through me, making me clutch him tighter. I gasped, grasping for air between kisses, and my name on his lips, spoken in a hoarse whisper, sounded like an incantation. His hands held me so firmly I knew he would never let me fall. I drowned in the feeling of him, in his scent, in the heat of his skin under my fingers, as the wave of pleasure built higher and higher. Our bodies moved in unison, without hesitation, without pause, only desire and a frantic pulse. I felt the wave crest, my body no longer obeying reason. One moment, and it broke over me, as though the fog itself had rushed inside and erased all boundaries. I clung to his shoulders, biting my lip to hold back a cry, but the sound tore free, filling the bus. Marcus answered with a harder movement, and his kiss swallowed my moan. Then he too let go. His body shuddered, and we collapsed together into one desperate release, holding our breath. When the wave finally ebbed, I lay against his chest, my heart pounding in the same frantic rhythm as his. We stayed like that, lost amid the low hum of the engine, and I knew we had crossed the point of no return. The fog outside began to scatter, but between us there were no walls left. The silence after the storm was so loud I could hear not only my own breathing but also the beating of his heart. My body was still trembling, as if the echo of passion held me captive. I lay on his chest, feeling the warmth, not wanting to move, afraid of losing this fragile illusion of safety. Marcus ran his fingers through my hair gently, as though he feared breaking something delicate inside me. It was a different kind of touch, not greedy, not hungry, but warm and unexpectedly tender. "You're shaking," he said quietly, his voice stripped of the boldness that had undone me minutes earlier. I smiled faintly through the exhaustion. "And you're my fog. I no longer know where reality is." He laughed softly, low, and the sound melted away the last of my fear. We sat there while the bus rolled through the sleeping streets, and a thought crept into me. What happens next? This was supposed to be an accident, a single night, forgotten with neon lights and morning coffee. Yet in his eyes I saw something that would not let me go so easily. Marcus leaned closer, and our lips met again, this time calmly, slowly, like a conversation without words. "I don't want this to end," he whispered against my lips, and I felt my heart leap again, not from passion but from a mix of fear and longing. Because the night could end, but what would we do with what we had awoken inside ourselves? We were silent, but the silence was not empty. It breathed, pulsed, clung to my skin as sharply as his hands had minutes before. I gathered my strength, lifted my head, and looked at him. In the dim light his eyes seemed even darker, and I suddenly realized I knew nothing about him beyond his name and the force of his kisses. "Who are you really, Marcus?" I asked, my voice trembling not from fear but from the importance of his answer. He smiled faintly, stroking my hand. "An ordinary man who's been hiding in the night too long. And tonight the night gave me something I never even dreamed of." I froze, trying to understand whether these were just words spoken after closeness or whether they carried truth. But his gaze did not waver, it was steady, honest, almost painful. "And you?" he asked. I swallowed air, images flashing in my mind, the office, endless reports, the empty apartment, my constant flight into work. I'm a woman who forgot what it's like to feel alive, I whispered. His hand touched my face again, and he looked at me as though he saw me entirely, without masks, without facades, without armor. Then stay alive with me, he said. The bus turned off the bridge, and the glow of street lamps in a new neighborhood cut through the fog. I felt I was standing on the edge of something far larger than a night's encounter. The bus rolled on, but I barely noticed the road. Inside me his words still echoed, the way he looked at me as if there was more in me than I could see myself. The city outside the windows began to stir again, neon, a few night stragglers, shop windows glowing cold. With every passing light I felt reality creeping back. "What about in the morning?" slipped from my lips. Marcus leaned closer, his profile caught in the yellow glow of a street lamp. "What do you want it to be?" That simple question unbalanced me more than any kiss. I wasn't used to thinking about my wants. I was used to planning, controlling, breaking life into charts and deadlines. And now I couldn't answer. My fingers reached for his hand without thought. He laced our fingers together as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "We can leave it at just tonight if that's what you decide," he added. There was no pressure in his voice, no fear, only acceptance. And that scared me even more, to know the choice was truly mine. The bus neared the final stop. I saw the station lights ahead, and with them my anxiety rose. If I stepped off now, it would end. If I stayed, it would begin, something new, unknown, maybe dangerous. But my heart already knew the answer, even if my mind still clung to doubt. I turned to him and whispered, "I'm afraid, but I want more than one night." Marcus squeezed my hand tighter and leaned close, his breath burning against my cheek. "Then in the morning I'll still be here." The final stop greeted us with the cold glow of station lamps. The bus sighed with its brakes, the engine falling silent, as if it too knew the night's journey was over. I sat still a moment longer, clutching his hand in mine, not ready to break the connection. Marcus rose first, his silhouette against the storefront lights seeming even larger than in the narrow bus. He extended his hand, and without hesitation I took it. The doors opened with a sharp hiss, but the city night met us with silence. The fog was already thinning, the streets almost empty, only the occasional taxi sliding over the asphalt. I felt the chill on my cheeks, and at the same time realized we were no longer hidden inside the dark bus. Here everything was real, exposed, dangerous in its clarity. We walked side by side, and my heart raced with each step. If someone looked at us now, they might think we had been together for years. Yet for me this was fragile, new, like ice beneath my feet. "Where to now?" I asked, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. Marcus looked at me as if seeing through every mask I had. "Wherever you'll let me stay by your side." His words sounded simple, but carried more power than any promise. I stopped beneath the sign of a late-night cafe. Its window glowed warmly, almost empty inside. And suddenly I knew the choice was already made. "Let's go," I said, and together we stepped inside, leaving the night behind but carrying its fog between us, a fog that would not fade quickly. The cafe greeted us with warmth and the smell of freshly ground Arabica. The lamps overhead glowed softly, scattering golden light across the wooden tables. We sat in a corner, away from others, and for the first time all night I felt the adrenaline begin to fade. Marcus took off his jacket, draping it over the chair, and in that simple gesture there was something strangely domestic. He looked calm, yet his eyes stayed as watchful as they had in the bus's darkness. "So, an IT director?" he asked as the waitress placed 2 cups of black coffee before us. I nodded and sighed. "Yes. Sometimes it feels like I belong more to work than to myself." His gaze softened. "I know that feeling. I've been lost in night routes too. Day exists somewhere far away, but I'm always between stops." I smiled, truly, for the first time that night. 2 people running from the world, and tonight we collided. He lifted his cup, took a sip, and without looking away said, "Maybe we were both searching for this stop." Inside me something tightened, my body reacting not to the coffee but to his words. It scared me, too fast, too deep. But it also felt like breathing fully for the first time. "Why me?" slipped out. Marcus leaned forward, his shadow falling across the table between us. "Because when you stepped onto that empty bus, I saw in your eyes the same exhaustion I carry. And at the same time, the spark that must not be lost." His voice was quiet, but each word struck directly inside me. And I knew, this was no longer just an accident of the night. It was the beginning of something much greater. The coffee slowly cooled, but we barely touched it. Words flowed between us, each one feeling more important than taste or aroma. Marcus sat across from me, his large hands wrapped around the cup, but his eyes never let me go. "I once had another life," he began suddenly, as if deciding to open a door long locked. "I worked in logistics, offices, meetings, contracts. And one day I woke up and realized I wasn't there anymore. I carried only fatigue with me. So I got behind the wheel and drove into the night. Since then I've thought of myself as a passenger in my own fate." His voice wasn't self-pitying, rather calm, resigned. I listened and felt how his story echoed inside me. "I got lost in work too," I confessed. "I thought if I kept everything under control, I'd be safe. But control turned into a cage. Sometimes I feel like I haven't lived for years, only performed functions." It was hard to say it out loud, but at the same time easy, because his eyes didn't judge. They accepted, as if he had always known my truth. "You're strong," he said. "No, I'm tired," I replied with a crooked smile. He reached across the table, touched my fingers. The gesture held no passion of the night, but something much deeper, support. "Maybe it's time for both of us to stop running?" he asked. His words hung between us, and I felt my answer rising inside, warm and dangerous, like fire about to break free. I stayed silent for a long time, swallowing words I had hidden deep inside for years. Then I lifted my eyes and saw him waiting, not pushing, not rushing, just sitting there, listening. "I don't know how to build relationships," I finally said. "I had a husband, we lived together for 5 years. And every time I thought we were together, he was in some world I couldn't enter. His betrayals became the daily poison I breathed. And when it all collapsed, I buried myself in work so I would never feel that emptiness again. So I wouldn't depend on anyone." The words cut me from the inside, but as I spoke them, I felt the pain loosen, as if it was losing its hold. Marcus listened intently, his fingers still resting on mine, that quiet warmth giving me strength to go on. He lowered his gaze to the cup, then lifted his eyes again. "My father drank," he said softly. "Every night was like a war. And when I grew up, I swore I'd never become him. But the fight left a mark. For a long time I didn't trust myself enough to let anyone close. It was easier to drive through the night than through someone's heart." He sighed and leaned back in his chair. His honesty struck me harder than I expected. We both sat there with our wounds open in the middle of a night cafe, but for the first time I felt it didn't make us weak. It made us real. And maybe this was the start of something new, not an escape, but a meeting. We sat there a long time, and the world outside the cafe windows began to change. The fog retreated, and in the east the sky was already tinged with gray shades of morning. I felt how the conversation, which had exposed our wounds, left behind a strange calm. Marcus silently traced his thumb along my palm, as if checking that I was still here, not lost again inside my thoughts. I looked at him, and for the first time I saw not just strength, there was vulnerability in his eyes. It pulled me closer than any passion of the night. I reached out and placed my hand on his cheek. His skin was warm from the long night, the stubble rough against my palm, yet it felt comforting, real. He tilted his head slightly into my touch, closed his eyes, and it was a gesture of trust he perhaps hadn't allowed himself in years. We didn't speak. We no longer needed to hide behind words. I felt the tension slowly melt away, leaving tenderness that was harder to bear than desire. He brushed his lips against my wrist, lightly, almost shyly. The wave of warmth that surged through me was stronger than fire. I leaned closer, and our lips met again, but this kiss was different, slow, attentive, like a promise to stay. His hand covered mine, pressing it gently to his face, and I knew he wanted to hold on to this moment as much as I did. Outside, a new day was beginning, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. When we stepped out of the cafe, the sky was already growing lighter. The gray veil of dawn stretched over the city, and the neon that had seemed almighty only an hour ago was losing its power before the sunrise. I stopped on the steps and drew in a breath of cool air, sharp in my lungs but cleansing after the suffocating magic of the night. Marcus walked beside me, his stride steady, even though his life, like mine, was full of uncertainty. I glanced at him sideways, his face in the morning light looked softer, calmer. We crossed an empty street, and though the sun itself was still hidden, its presence was painting the sky in golden hues. I felt a tightening in my chest. It was a sign, a reminder that the night could not last forever. "I can walk you home," he said, as if it were the most natural thing. I nodded, though inside me a storm raged. To go home with him meant stepping further, letting this become more than coincidence. Yet the feel of his hand around mine quieted my fear. We walked in silence, but it was no longer tense. It became a space where new feelings could be born. At the intersection we stopped, the light blinking yellow, the street still empty. Marcus leaned down, and his kiss was short but deep, sealing the night that had become our story. The sun touched the tops of buildings, and I realized, from this morning, something was beginning that would change me forever. We climbed the stairs of my building, and each step echoed louder than the rumble of the night bus. I felt my heart beating in rhythm, not knowing if it was fear or anticipation. When we stopped at my door, I froze for a moment with the keys in my hand. Everything that had happened in the night was wrapped in fog, like a dream, but now it was happening in reality, on the threshold of my home. I unlocked the door and switched on the light. The apartment greeted us with silence and the faint smell of coffee still lingering from yesterday morning. Everything was arranged too neatly, looking controlled, almost sterile, the way I hid from the chaos of the world. But now the order seemed lonely. Marcus stepped inside carefully, as if he might break something fragile. I dropped my bag on the floor, turned, and looked at him. In his eyes there was no hesitation, only quiet waiting. I took a step closer and touched his hand. He answered with a light squeeze, and we both smiled, for the first time, truly relaxed. I kicked off my shoes, he hung up his jacket, and this simple gesture looked so intimate, as though he had always belonged in this space. We went to the kitchen, and I switched on the kettle out of habit. We laughed at small things, and each minute erased the line between a chance encounter and something bigger. When he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around me, resting his chin on my shoulder, I felt it, the closeness no night's passion could give. It was calm, real, as if he had found home in me, and I in him. His embrace in the kitchen felt so natural I forgot for a moment how we had gotten here. I leaned back into him, feeling the warmth of his chest and the slow rhythm of his breathing. This was no longer the explosion of passion from the night, these touches carried a silence that healed. I turned to face him, our faces so close. He brushed his fingers along my cheek, gently, as though he feared breaking something invisible. Our lips met in a kiss, calm and lingering. I felt his hand slide along my waist, pulling me closer, but this time there was no rush. Every movement became a discovery, every breath a new page. We moved to the bedroom, the morning light spilling through the curtains, painting the floor with gold. I felt him lie down beside me, and we looked into each other's eyes without hurry. His hand touched first my collarbone, then my shoulder, and I shivered under the slow rhythm. He studied me as if for the first time, though we had already been closer than rules ever allowed. I traced my fingers over his chest, feeling the calm and strength beneath the skin. Our bodies found unity again, but now it was soft, measured, centered on sensation. I closed my eyes and let each wave roll through me, knowing this was no longer an escape from emptiness but a return to life. When his breath joined mine, I understood we were creating something new, not destroying, but building. And this tender closeness turned out to be stronger than any passion of the night. Morning light filtered through the curtains, and I woke to the gentle warmth beside me. His arm lay across my waist, and each breath of Marcus brushed against my back. I closed my eyes again for a moment, trying to hold on to the fragile illusion that the world outside had vanished. But it hadn't. The world was waiting, ready to remind me of deadlines, emails, endless meetings. I carefully turned to face him. Marcus slept peacefully, and that surprised me most of all. A man accustomed to night shifts and fatigue now looked as though he had finally found a place to rest. I reached out, brushing my hand along his cheek lightly so as not to wake him. He stirred, opened his eyes, and there was no confusion in them, only calm. "Good morning," he whispered. His voice was rough with sleep, and it made me smile. "Good morning," I replied, and the word felt new to me. Not a routine greeting, but a beginning. We lay in silence a few minutes longer, listening to each other. Then he rose, went to the kitchen, and returned with 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one, and that simple gesture felt more intimate than any of the night's kisses. I sipped and felt the morning quiet fill with meaning. This was my home, but it looked different now, because he was in it. And I realized my greatest fear was not the chaos of the day, but the thought of being alone again. We sat on the floor beside the bed with cups of coffee, morning light spilling across the room, making everything too real. I felt the silence between us grow thicker, not as a burden, but as anticipation. "What now?" I asked, staring into the dark surface of the coffee as if I could find an answer there. Marcus set his cup down and leaned toward me. "Whatever you want. I didn't come into your life to set rules. But I know one thing, I don't want to disappear." His words sounded simple, yet carried more weight than any promise. I breathed deeply, feeling panic and hope rise together inside me. "I have work. You have night shifts. We're from different worlds," I said, trying to shield myself with logic. He smiled faintly, that smile that seemed to dissolve my doubts. "The world is always different. What matters is if we want to find the same stop." I looked at him, and realized he was serious. This wasn't a casual romance, not a spark to fade. In his eyes I saw something bigger, the willingness to stay. And that terrified me even more. "I don't know how to promise," I whispered. He took my hand, placed it against his chest. "You don't have to. Just be. The rest will come." His heart beat steady and strong beneath my palm, and I felt mine start to fall into the same rhythm. And maybe that was the future, not plans, not schedules, but 2 people who finally allowed themselves to meet. The phone on the nightstand suddenly rang, its sharp tone slicing through the silence we had been holding. I flinched, as if someone had broken into my protected space. On the screen glowed the company logo, a reminder that the world I had fled from in the night had not gone anywhere. Marcus watched me quietly, his gaze calm but attentive. "Will you answer?" he asked. I looked at the phone, at that cold window into another world, and felt 2 forces fight inside me. One demanded I pick it up, return to the rules and reports I knew, the other pulled me to stay here, in the warmth of his presence. "Is it important?" he asked softly, as if afraid to shatter what had already begun between us. "Yes. But not more than this," I said, touching his hand. The phone kept ringing, then fell silent. We exchanged glances, and I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The world outside truly was waiting, ready to break in at any moment. I slid the phone into the drawer, as if I could postpone reality, and breathed deeper. "You know you'll have to step out eventually," Marcus said, his voice without reproach, only fact. "I know," I answered, and deep down I felt I didn't want to step out alone. He leaned down, kissed my temple, and whispered, "Then step out with me." I closed my eyes, fear tightening my throat. Yet at the same time I knew, this could be the beginning of real change. We stepped outside, and the city was already waking up. Morning noise was gathering strength, trams clanged, cars honked, people hurried with coffee in their hands. Everything looked so ordinary that for a moment I felt like a stranger in this world. After a night that stripped me to the bone, the bustle seemed even louder. Marcus walked beside me, his hand lightly holding mine, the only anchor keeping me from drowning in the current of reality. A few passers-by gave us quick glances, but with him there I didn't feel the need to justify myself or wear a mask. "Here we're just ordinary," I said, trying to smile, though it came out sad. He stopped and turned me toward him. "I don't want us to be ordinary. I want us to be real." His words were simple, but they nearly made my knees give way. We crossed the street, and the sun climbed higher, painting the buildings in gold. I felt the new day push inside me, and it was scarier than the night's passion. At the corner cafe a line was already forming. I caught myself thinking that yesterday I would have been in that line too, rushing to work, feeling only fatigue and emptiness. But today I had him beside me. We sat on a bench by the park, where morning joggers circled the paths. I leaned against his shoulder and closed my eyes, listening to the city. "Maybe the world isn't so frightening if you face it together," I whispered. Marcus squeezed my hand, and in that gesture was more of an answer than any words could give. We rose from the bench and walked down a narrow street where the smell of fresh bread guided us like a signpost. A small bakery on the corner glowed with yellow warmth, and through the glass we could see the baker laying out hot croissants onto the shelves. Inside, a few people already stood, sleepy, in jackets, phones in hand. We joined the line, and I felt how the ordinary world brushed right up against us. Usually mornings like this felt empty, mechanical, but now everything was different. Marcus stood behind me, his hand resting lightly on my waist, and that simple gesture turned a gray morning into something new. "What should we get?" he asked, leaning toward my ear. "Croissants and coffee," I answered, and my heart trembled at how natural it sounded, as though we had always done this. We stepped out with a bag of warm pastries and sat at a small table by the window. I watched him bite into a croissant and laughed when sugar dust stayed on his lips. He wiped it away with his finger, then leaned in to kiss me, leaving sweetness on my mouth. It was ordinary and yet so intimate that I felt the world stop. "This," he said, looking at me. "What?" I asked. "Life. The kind worth leaving the night for." I hid my smile behind the coffee cup, but inside I already knew, he was right. And maybe the real miracle wasn't in the fog or in passion, but in these small morning moments when we were learning how to be together. We stepped out of the bakery, and the city was fully awake. People hurried to work, some talking on their phones, taxis honking at intersections. I felt reality pressing in from all sides, reminding me that my night escape could not last forever. We stopped at a crossroads, and I looked at him. Marcus seemed calm, yet in his eyes I saw the same question that lived in me. "You have work," he said, as though reminding me of what I had tried to run from. "And you have night shifts," I answered. He smiled, but it was a sad smile. We stood in the stream of people, and for a moment it felt as if the world wanted to pull us in different directions. I took a deep breath, feeling fear and longing battle inside me. "I don't know how this is supposed to work," I admitted. "We can learn together," he replied, taking my hand. His fingers intertwined with mine, and that touch was stronger than any promise. The light turned green, and the crowd moved forward. We stepped two, but not apart together. I knew there would be difficulties ahead, fears, moments when I might want to run again. But right now I was walking beside him, and that was enough. The fog of the night had lifted, yet its warmth remained inside me. And maybe, just maybe, our story was only beginning.